My husband wrongfully accused me of cheating and threw me out after I got pregnant, claiming a fertility test proved he was sterile, so I filed for divorce, only for him to later discover that his mother had faked the results in a sick attempt to ruin our marriage and turn him against me. At 25 years old, I find myself needing to share the story of my husband and how our life together unraveled in the most devastating manner. For more than 2 years, we had been striving to conceive, and this endeavor had become a tremendous source of tension within our union. Each passing month without a successful pregnancy result felt like an additional setback, prompting us to question if there was an issue with either of us or if patience was simply required. Approximately 2 months prior, I finally received the positive result we had been longing for. My excitement was overwhelming. I could scarcely control it when I informed my husband. He appeared pleased as well, though I observed a certain quietness about him that was unexpected. We chose to host a modest gathering with both our families to announce the news, eager to share our joy with all those who had supported us throughout this journey. The celebration proceeded smoothly, with everyone offering congratulations and discussing potential baby names and ideas for the nursery. However, following that event, a shift occurred in my husband. I began to perceive a growing aloofness and a chill in his demeanor, unlike anything I had experienced from him previously. He would return from work and barely acknowledge me. When I attempted to engage him in conversations about arrangements for the baby or upcoming medical visits, his responses were brief, and he would often invent reasons to exit the room or occupy himself elsewhere. I repeatedly inquired about his state, wondering if the pregnancy was unsettling him, but he would simply attribute his mood to fatigue from work or having much on his thoughts, offering no clear reasons. This pattern continued for numerous weeks, and my frustration steadily mounted. I was contending with morning sickness and all the typical alterations accompanying the initial stages of pregnancy, and during this period, I genuinely required my husband's assistance. Instead, he behaved as if I had committed an error or as though he no longer wished to be near me. I attempted to communicate with him on several occasions regarding the impact of his conduct and my deep need for his presence and encouragement, yet nothing seemed to resonate with him. 3 weeks ago, I ultimately reached my limit. I could no longer endure residing in a home where my own spouse regarded me as a stranger. I informed him that unless he could clarify the situation and resume acting as an affectionate partner, I would gather my belongings and stay with my mother until he resolved whatever was troubling him. It was then that everything disintegrated in the most catastrophic fashion imaginable. He began to shout at me, leveling accusations of infidelity, claiming there was no possibility the baby was his because he had acquired test outcomes indicating his infertility. He had been concealing this knowledge for weeks, keeping me completely unaware. I was utterly stunned. Not only was he alleging I had engaged in an affair, something I would never contemplate, but he had also undergone fertility examinations without prior consultation with me, subsequently hoarding the findings while treating me dreadfully for weeks. I attempted to convey that the allegation was utterly unfounded and that I had never been disloyal to him in any capacity, yet he refused to heed my words, persistently asserting that my pregnancy could only be explained by my involvement with another person. He was bellowing about my perceived betrayal and the ruin of our marriage, subsequently informing me that I either needed to undergo a paternity assessment to establish his fatherhood or remain estranged from him indefinitely, as he desired no further contact. He then physically ejected me from our residence while I was pregnant, instructing me to seek refuge with whoever I had supposedly been unfaithful with. I had no recourse but my mother's residence, as I was so overwhelmed by shock and distress that coherent thought was impossible. That night was spent weeping, grappling with how my marital bond had fractured so abruptly and entirely. The following day, I sought legal counsel and initiated divorce proceedings, having come to the realization that my husband held no trust in me whatsoever, and had opted to credit the most negative interpretation of my character, devoid of any substantiation. 2 days prior, my husband appeared at my mother's home, utterly distraught. He confided that he had unearthed a dreadful secret concerning his mother and uncle, which elucidated all that had transpired between us. He explained that he had been experiencing profound despair over our estrangement, and had visited his mother's residence to speak with her. While there, he inadvertently overheard a dialogue between his mother and his uncle, which unveiled a scheme I could never have conceived. His uncle operates a fertility facility, and evidently, his mother had persuaded the uncle to manipulate my husband's diagnostic outcomes, creating the impression that he was infertile. Her motive for this was to instill suspicion in my husband's thoughts regarding my loyalty. My husband discovered that his mother had been subtly undermining him against me for years, making remarks about my mother's prior romantic experiences, and hinting that I might emulate her and engage in clandestine relationships. Before my conception, My mother had engaged in relationships with various individuals, and she had been candid about enjoying informal romantic connections during her 20s. However, upon discovering her pregnancy, she entirely altered her lifestyle, dedicating herself wholly to raising me as a single parent. My mother-in-law had evidently concluded that my mother's history rendered her unsuitable, and for years, she had been relaying to my husband that I might have inherited my mother's inclination toward casual liaisons, cautioning him to exercise prudence in fully trusting me. The fertility test outcomes were entirely fabricated. My husband possesses no infertility whatsoever. This implies that his uncle had intentionally supplied erroneous medical data to dismantle our marital bond, at the behest of his mother. My husband wept as he recounted all of this, imploring me to return home and attempt to mend our fractured relationship. He had recognized that his own family had manipulated him into distrusting me and dismantling our connection. Yet, I explained that I could not simply overlook and disregard what had transpired. Despite his mother and uncle's deceit, he had still opted to believe I was capable of infidelity without any substantiation, and he had expelled me from our residence while I carried his child. I conveyed that his readiness to credit the worst about me demonstrated a profound lack of true knowledge or faith in me, and such a foundational issue in our partnership could not be rectified merely by the revelation of his family's falsehoods. He repeatedly expressed remorse, affirming his love and desire to amend matters. However, I informed him that I required time to contemplate the entire situation, and was not prepared to make any choices regarding our shared future. The divorce documents have already been submitted, and I remain uncertain whether to halt the proceedings or endeavor to reconstruct our marriage, as I struggle to move beyond his swift assumption of my disloyalty and his eagerness to discard our relationship based on mere conjectures, rather than engaging in a genuine discussion about his misgivings. Therefore, my inquiry is whether my reluctance to reconcile with my husband, even after learning of his family's deceptions, is unwarranted. A brief clarification regarding my mother's circumstances is necessary, as I believe it illuminates why my mother-in-law specifically targeted her. My mother was never indiscriminately intimate in a manner that inflicted harm or generated relational difficulties. She consistently communicated transparently with the men she encountered about her intentions, whether seeking a serious commitment or a more informal connection. Her diverse dating experiences throughout her 20s stemmed from a quest to ascertain her life's desires and the type of companion who would bring her contentment. Such self-discovery is entirely valid as long as all parties act with candor and deference. Upon discovering her pregnancy with me, my mother instantly ceased dating, dedicating herself solely to preparing for maternal responsibilities. She toiled tirelessly to provide for me and cultivate a secure, affectionate home environment. While I was young, she returned to academics to secure improved employment and sustain us more comfortably, relinquishing much of her personal life and social engagements to ensure I had everything essential during my formative years. My mother-in-law had seemingly concluded that anyone with a history of casual relationships was inherently defective and unreliable. For years, she subtly insinuated to my husband that I might have inherited my mother's alleged moral imperfections. She would emphasize the importance of him truly understanding me before extending complete trust, and she would recount narratives of wives who had been unfaithful and ruined their households, always contriving to link these women to mothers who were perceived as inadequate role models. Reflecting now, I discern how she systematically sowed seeds of apprehension in my husband's consciousness throughout our entire courtship. At the time, I merely attributed it to an excessive maternal protectiveness, typical of some mothers-in-law. I never grasped that she was deliberately endeavoring to subvert our marriage, driven by her censorious opinions of my mother's history, nor did I ever foresee her taking such extreme measures as involving her sibling in fabricating medical diagnostic outcomes to instigate a marital crisis. First update 2 weeks later. I wish to inform everyone about the developments since my initial post concerning my husband and his family's deceitful schemes. I am profoundly grateful to everyone who dedicated time to share their insights and encouragement. Navigating this circumstance has been exceptionally isolating and bewildering, and it was beneficial to hear from individuals who comprehended the severity of my husband's and mother-in-law's transgressions. After contemplating everything for nearly 2 weeks and discussing it extensively with my mother and a therapist, I reached the firm decision to unequivocally inform my husband that I would not be resuming our marriage and that I intended to proceed with the divorce as arranged. I contacted him and clarified that regardless of his mother's years of manipulation, he had still opted to question my fidelity without any justifiable basis. Furthermore, he had chosen to undergo fertility assessments without prior consultation with me, which underscored a profound deficit in communication and confidence within our partnership. I communicated that I was especially wounded by the disparaging manner in which he had spoken of my mother during our dispute, as my mother had exerted immense effort to transform her life and afford me a commendable upbringing, and she did not merit having her history cast back at her as though it somehow impugned my integrity or dependability. I emphasize that wholesome relationships necessitate partners openly addressing their apprehensions, rather than covertly scrutinizing one another and presuming unfaithfulness without corroboration. Several days subsequent to that telephone discussion, my husband appeared at my mother's residence, requesting an in-person conversation. He seemed genuinely repentant for all that had transpired, yet I perceived his rationale for seeking reconciliation as somewhat contradictory. He continually spoke of his deep affection for me and his desire to support me throughout the pregnancy. However, I highlighted that he had exhibited no concern for my pregnant state when he evicted me from our residence and accused me of infidelity, thus rendering his abrupt solicitude for my welfare more indicative of his own culpability than of authentic care for me and the infant. During our discourse, I plainly stated that I considered him equally accountable for the collapse of our marriage. Although his mother and uncle had undeniably manipulated and misled him, his inherent insecurities and readiness to credit the most negative interpretation of me had initially enabled their insidious influence to take root. I asserted that a steadfast and devoted partner would have engaged me with inquiries or apprehensions regarding fertility, rather than covertly undergoing testing and subsequently erupting in anger when the findings diverged from his anticipations. I further clarified that even if we could somehow overcome the breaches of trust and the damaging words and deeds, I could not envision attempting to reconstruct a relationship knowing that his mother actively harbored animosity towards me and had striven so relentlessly to dismantle our marriage. I conveyed that I would never again feel at ease or secure in his mother's presence, and I failed to perceive how we could maintain a functional familial connection when one of his most intimate relatives had demonstrated such manipulative and heartless conduct. My husband endeavored to contend that we could circumvent his mother's meddling by restricting her interaction with us and establishing stringent limits. Nevertheless, I articulated that the harm was already inflicted, and I lacked confidence in his ability to uphold those boundaries should his mother persist in her efforts to influence him over time. I recalled to him that she had been shaping his perceptions of me for years unbeknownst to him, and I could not be certain he would not revert to those tendencies of apprehension and distrust if she continued to advance her objectives. He appeared to grasp the gravity of my decision regarding the divorce, prompting him to inquire if we might, at minimum, attempt couples counseling to explore any possibility of restoring confidence between us. I informed him that I was not averse to therapy for the purpose of learning effective co-parenting strategies, but I held no interest in striving to salvage our romantic connection, as too much damage had transpired for me to ever feel protected and assured with him again. The discussion concluded with his acknowledgement that he respected my choice, despite his devastation, and he asked if we could, at least, endeavor to preserve an amicable relationship for the child's sake. I concurred that our focus should be on determining how to be effective co-parents, yet I emphasized that any custody agreements would unequivocally require clauses that entirely excluded his mother and uncle from our child's life, as I would not permit them to exert any sway over my baby's existence following the harm they had inflicted upon our family. Second update, 3 weeks subsequent to the first. The dissolution proceedings have advanced, and we have been addressing all the legal and financial particulars with limited direct interaction between my husband and myself. This arrangement has proven more beneficial for both of us, as every prior discussion tended to become emotionally fraught and challenging. My legal representative has managed the majority of communication with his attorney, and we have successfully moved forward in apportioning our assets and liabilities without needing to re-examine the distressing specifics that precipitated our separation. My former husband has also initiated legal action against his uncle and the fertility facility for supplying erroneous medical data and disrupting our marriage. While I am not directly implicated in that litigation, I harbor hope that my husband can secure some measure of recompense for the actions his family perpetrated against us. I have not yet reached conclusive decisions concerning custody provisions, as I am still endeavoring to assimilate all that has transpired and determine the optimal course for the infant. However, I am certain I desire primary custody, at least initially, given my intention to breastfeed and manage most of the infant's daily care during the initial months. I have contemplated that eventually, we might establish some form of joint custody arrangement, but I wish to observe how my husband manages the duties of fatherhood and his capacity to uphold suitable boundaries with his mother before consenting to any overnight stays or prolonged periods away from me. My mother has offered extraordinary support throughout this entire ordeal. She has accompanied me to all my prenatal appointments and assisted me in preparing for the baby's advent, which has profoundly impacted me, as I had always envisioned my husband undertaking these activities alongside me. The pregnancy has progressed without complication despite the accumulated stress, and my physician assures me that the infant appears robust and developing appropriately, though she has urged me to strive to reduce stress and prioritize self-care during this challenging period. I have been contending with some feelings of culpability regarding the absence of the stable two-parent household I had consistently hoped to provide for my child. Occasionally, I fret about whether I am curtailing my baby's prospects for contentment by declining to reconcile with my husband. Nonetheless, I also acknowledge that two distinct parents who are healthy and stable could potentially offer a superior upbringing for a child than a single dysfunctional family marred by perpetual strain and suspicion. I am confident that my baby will flourish in an environment where both parents hold mutual respect, even if they are not united romantically. I have been consulting with a therapist to assist me in navigating these intricate emotions and to ready myself for the rigors of single parenthood. She has guided me in concentrating on aspects within my control, rather than fixating on all the ways I had wished circumstances would unfold differently. I am striving to maintain a hopeful outlook for the future, directing my attention to the reality that I will soon welcome a beautiful baby, cherished by both parents, even if we will not reside together as a complete family unit. The most arduous aspect has been managing the myriad practical shifts accompanying divorce and solitary parenting, such as arranging health coverage and childcare, and ensuring I possess all necessities to independently care for an infant. My mother has extended as much assistance as she is capable, and I possess a circle of supportive close companions, yet it remains daunting to ponder how profoundly my life will deviate from what I had envisioned and prepared for over the preceding few years. Third update, approximately 3 months later, approaching the conclusion of the divorce waiting period. As our marital dissolution neared its finalization, my husband and I were required to convene in person to deliberate custody arrangements and ascertain the practical specifics of how we would jointly raise our infant. The meeting, in fact, proceeded far more favorably than I had anticipated. We managed to engage in a fruitful discussion regarding our child's best interests, avoiding arguments about our defunct marriage or relitigating the painful occurrences between us. We concurred that the baby should primarily reside with me during the initial months, particularly while I am breastfeeding and establishing feeding and sleeping patterns. However, my husband would be able to visit consistently and dedicate time to fostering a connection with the baby throughout the day. We determined that overnight stays would likely be impractical until the baby is older and more settled into a routine, but that once our child reaches approximately 6 months of age, we could commence transitioning to a more equitable custody arrangement, wherein the baby would spend roughly half the week with each of us. I was astonished by my husband's measured and considerate demeanor during this exchange. He appeared truly dedicated to being an exemplary father and prioritizing our child's welfare, rather than attempting to leverage custody to coerce me into reconsidering our divorce. He admitted that his conduct had precipitated our separation, and that he comprehended my inability to trust him sufficiently to reconstruct our romantic bond. Nevertheless, he voiced optimism that we could, at minimum, cultivate a respectful co-parenting alliance for our baby's benefit. He also offered an apology for his prior absence in supporting me during the pregnancy, and inquired if he could begin attending prenatal appointments with me. This would allow him to participate in preparations for the baby's arrival, and gain knowledge regarding what to anticipate during labor and delivery. I consented to his attendance at future appointments, provided he understood that our presence was as co-parents, not as a couple, and that I did not wish him to misinterpret my willingness to include him as an indication of a change of heart regarding our divorce. A point on which we both held strong conviction was the complete exclusion of his mother and uncle from our child's life. My husband, in fact, initiated this topic himself without my prompting, which signaled to me his genuine comprehension of the gravity of their meddling and the extent of the harm they had inflicted upon our family. He stated he had no intent of reconciling with either individual, and would be amenable to incorporating legal stipulations into our custody agreement to guarantee they would never have any interaction with our infant. We also deliberated the monetary aspects of child support. My husband informed me that he intended to allocate half of any funds he ultimately obtains from his legal action against his uncle and the fertility clinic to ensure our child possesses everything requisite for a comfortable and protected upbringing. I valued this overture, as it demonstrated his earnestness in assuming accountability for our baby's provision. The discussion extended for several hours, and by its conclusion, I experienced a heightened sense of optimism regarding our capacity to collaborate as parents. I could discern that my husband was truly contrite about the events that transpired, and that he was dedicated to fulfilling the role of an excellent father. I began to sense that perhaps we could construct a viable co-parenting dynamic that would furnish our child with the constancy and affection every infant merits. Following his departure, I recognized that much of my indignation towards him had dissipated over the preceding months. While I still felt wounded and disheartened by the dissolution of our marriage, I was no longer overwhelmed by animosity or ill will towards him. I believe that the passage of time and separation had aided me in processing all that occurred, and I was beginning to feel prepared to concentrate on the forthcoming period, rather than lingering on the numerous ways our partnership had deviated. Fourth update, 2 months post-divorce finalization. It has been 8 weeks since our divorce was officially concluded, and I wish to apprise everyone of the current state of affairs with my former husband and our anticipatory measures for the infant's birth. My ex-husband has consistently been present at my prenatal appointments, as we had arranged. Additionally, he has been visiting me regularly to share time and converse about preparations for the baby, an experience far more constructive and encouraging than I had anticipated given the calamitous end of our marriage. The baby has recently exhibited significantly more activity, and my ex-husband has been able to perceive the kicks and movements during his visits. This has proven immensely thrilling for him, and has rendered the pregnancy a more tangible and immediate reality for both of us. He has immersed himself in parenting literature and conducted thorough research on all aspects of infant care, appearing genuinely zealous about embracing fatherhood. This has been comforting for me, as I desire our child to have a father who is truly devoted to being engaged and participatory. During a recent discussion, my former husband offered a direct apology to both myself and my mother for having credited his family's fabrications concerning us and for permitting their influence to dismantle our marriage. He appeared truly chagrined by how he had allowed his mother to sway his perceptions and sentiments about me through the years. He confided that he had undertaken considerable introspection and therapeutic work to comprehend his susceptibility to his mother's corrosive impact. He acknowledged his enduring insecurity regarding his adequacy for me, which had increased his propensity to accept insinuations that I might be disloyal or unreliable. He implored both of us to consider any means by which he could demonstrate he was not a reprehensible individual, merely one who had been led astray and deceived by those he confided in. He expressed a desire to dedicate the remainder of his life to atoning for his missteps and embodying the finest father and co-parent he could possibly be. My mother and I deliberated his appeal in private and resolved that we were prepared to pardon him and advance towards a constructive co-parenting arrangement, recognizing that our collective collaboration would be essential for many years in raising our child, and that clinging to indignation and bitterness would serve no one's best interest. I also reiterated my condition that his mother and uncle be legally prohibited from any contact with our child. My former husband assented instantly, without any dispute or resistance, which confirmed to me his profound grasp of the perilous and detrimental impact their influence had wielded upon our family. He affirmed that he had entirely severed ties with both of them and harbored no intention of ever permitting them back into his existence, much less granting them access to his offspring. We have been collaborating with our legal representatives to complete all the custody documentation, incorporating precise stipulations regarding the estrangement of his family members from our baby. All should be formally endorsed and registered within the forthcoming weeks. I feel confident about the provisions we have established, and I believe we have devised a structure that will enable our child to foster robust connections with both parents, whilst being shielded from the pervasive manipulation and harmful elements that undermined our marriage. My former husband has also assisted me in preparing the nursery and making all arrangements for the baby's arrival at my mother's residence. While it is undeniably peculiar to undertake these tasks as divorced co-parents instead of an eager married couple, I am thankful that our child will be blessed with a father who is truly enthusiastic about parenthood and resolved to be engaged from the outset. I believe that our capacity to collaborate amicably and prioritize our baby's welfare demonstrates the growth and development we have both achieved through this arduous ordeal. Final update 1 week following childbirth. Though weary, I wish to impart one last development concerning my son's arrival and the progress of affairs with my former husband and our newly established co-parenting dynamic. Approximately 7 days prior, I commenced labor after a pregnancy that, fortunately, remained robust and straightforward, notwithstanding the considerable stress and emotional upheaval of the preceding months. Following a protracted labor, spanning nearly 20 hours, I ultimately delivered a splendid and healthy baby boy. Both my mother and my former husband were present at the medical facility alongside me throughout the entire labor and delivery continuum. Their combined presence offered immense solace, making a significant difference in assisting me through what was undeniably the most physically demanding experience of my existence. My ex-husband proved exceptionally helpful and encouraging during the labor, and he appeared truly elated and awestruck upon our son's eventual birth, a truly moving sight to behold despite all previous events between us. Upon our return from the hospital, my former husband has remained with us for several days, lending aid with all aspects pertinent to infant care. He has been resting on the sofa, assisting with diaper changes, feeding schedules, and all the arduous, continuous tasks inherent in welcoming a new baby. He has expressed no grievances nor behaved as if his help was a mere courtesy. Rather, he seems genuinely overjoyed to embrace fatherhood and keen to assimilate all knowledge regarding our son's upbringing. I perceive that he is utterly captivated by the infant, dedicating hours simply cradling him, conversing with him, and marveling at his delicate characteristics and motions. This has been truly delightful to observe, as I desire our son to possess a father who genuinely adores and cherishes him. The agreed-upon custody arrangements have been formally executed and submitted to the court. All stipulations concerning the distance of his mother and uncle from our child are now legally enforceable, affording me reassurance regarding our son's security and welfare. My former husband has consistently demonstrated his earnestness in upholding these limits, never once proposing a reconsideration or alteration of those prohibitions, which solidifies my conviction that he truly comprehends the extent of the harm his family inflicted and the paramount importance of safeguarding our child from their influence. I intend to pause further updates, as my sole focus is on adapting to life with the newborn and establishing regular patterns for nourishment and rest, alongside all the inherent demands of infant care. Both my former husband and I feel profoundly content with our collaborative parenting dynamic and our mutual dedication to ensuring our son experiences a marvelous and affectionate upbringing. I extend my gratitude to everyone who followed my narrative and extended encouragement and counsel throughout this arduous period. The awareness that individuals cared about my circumstances and my baby's well-being made a tangible impact in helping me navigate some profoundly bleak and bewildering months.